For 30 years as the king of late-night television, Johnny Carson was famous for being exceptionally composed, a man no one could rattle. However, there were exactly 9 times when this TV titan completely lost control. It wasn't due to equipment failure or a script error, but because these 9 beauties possessed such an overwhelming magnetism that they caused Johnny, the ultimate pro, to suddenly become flustered, break into a cold sweat, and stammer on live television. There were moments when Johnny even found himself staring blankly at his note cards because he had forgotten his own name, while the audience thought he was just joking. Backstage staff later revealed the truth. Johnny was actually crying for help to the director through his earpiece, paralyzed by nerves. From the sun-drenched smile of Farrah Fawcett to the commanding presence of Sophia Loren, each woman held a unique weapon that forced Johnny Carson to admit defeat. Let's take a look at who these 9 icons were that could make the Iron Man of Hollywood so undeniably rattled. Don't miss out on the most fascinating behind-the-scenes secrets of Hollywood. Hit subscribe now to support the channel. 1. Farrah Fawcett, the smile that blew up the studio. Farrah Fawcett's iconic red swimsuit poster, with over 12 million copies sold, became an irreplaceable symbol of 1970s America. Farrah was more than just an actress. She was a cultural phenomenon with a tidal wave of influence. When she stepped into the studio of The Tonight Show in 1976, Johnny Carson, a man intimately familiar with interviewing world leaders, experienced a genuine system overload. The evening began with a scenario that no writer could have predicted. Typically, an A-list superstar receives about 20 seconds of applause. But for Farrah, the roaring cheers from the Studio One audience reached an extreme like an earthquake, with no sign of stopping. NBC employees present that night recalled that the crowd seemed to fall into a state of collective hysteria. Johnny Carson could only sit there wearing a helpless but delighted grin, patiently waiting for the chaos to subside. Behind-the-scenes documents later revealed a dramatic detail in the control room. The director was repeatedly screaming into Johnny's ear, urging him to cut the applause short to start the show because airtime was incredibly expensive. In response, Johnny could only shrug as if to say he was completely powerless to control the situation. Farrah's charisma at that moment was described as human champagne, brilliant, refreshing, and overflowing with energy. After the taping, the editing team had to make the difficult decision to trim the applause for the broadcast to prevent the show from running over time, and more importantly, to ensure the king of television didn't look too small next to the sheer power of the girl from Texas. Throughout the conversation, the audience saw a very different Johnny Carson than his usual sharp-witted self. Instead of launching his signature jokes to command the stage, Johnny spent most of his time observing and feeding off the guests' enthusiasm. Farrah didn't try to be glamorous in a calculated way. She laughed naturally, her famous blonde waves bouncing with every movement. This lack of artifice was exactly the weapon that broke down Johnny's defenses. A producer once shared Johnny's private confession, "Some guests make you work hard to create an atmosphere, but with Farrah, she brings the whole sun into the room and you just sit there and enjoy it." Farrah Fawcett seemed never to realize that her beauty could create such intense pressure for those across from her. She spoke of her sudden fame with a humble, almost bewildered attitude, which only made Johnny soften further. His submission here wasn't due to a lack of skill, but rather a gentleman's respectful deference to a beauty at its most radiant peak. Johnny accepted playing the supporting role in his own playground to yield the entire frame to Farrah's smile. Her appearance proved that sometimes sincerity and positive energy can overturn a television order that had been strictly established for decades. That night was recorded as both Johnny Carson's easiest yet most challenging shift, as keeping his heart rate normal in front of Farrah Fawcett was a near impossible task. Her sun-like sweetness was enough to enchant Johnny. Yet the next woman on this list would make him freeze in an entirely different way, with a defiant confidence and a smoldering beauty that could make any prepared script utterly meaningless. 2. Raquel Welch, the woman who made Johnny forget his own name. In the 30-year history of The Tonight Show, the guest chair welcomed thousands of faces, but only a few names could shift the very atoms of Studio One the moment they stepped from behind the velvet curtain. Raquel Welch was one such name. When she made her debut in 1970, Johnny Carson, a man legendary for his absolute command of the stage, experienced a rare loss of words that defined his career. Television viewers that night witnessed a bizarre event. Johnny started to pose a question, then suddenly froze mid-sentence. He stared intensely at his guest, then looked down at his stack of the blue cards on the desk in total confusion. In those few seconds, which felt like an eternity, the Yiming of television admitted he had completely forgotten what he was about to say. This wasn't a scripted bit of comedy. It was a raw psychological reaction to a beauty that was physically overwhelming. A director later revealed that Johnny was genuinely rattled by Raquel's confidence. Unlike other stars who tried to act humble or friendly to win over the crowd, Raquel Welch entered the room with the mindset of a conqueror. Johnny's submission to Raquel was most evident in his desperate struggle to maintain professionalism. Backstage staff recalled that while Johnny usually kept a polite, sober distance from guests with Raquel, he was constantly fidgeting, adjusting his tie or breaking into uncharacteristically vulnerable smiles. One show writer famously remarked, "You don't interview Raquel Welch, you just try to survive the interview." She mastered every camera angle, every crossing of her legs, and even the way she fired back at Johnny's jokes with a sharpness that occasionally made him recoil. Most notable was Raquel's poise regarding the sex symbol title the media had thrust upon her. Instead of dodging it, she used it as a superpower to lead the conversation. Johnny Carson, despite his best efforts to steer the topic toward films or career, found himself repeatedly pulled back into the magnetic field of her charm. On one occasion, when Raquel wore a bold red dress with a daring cut, Johnny reportedly whispered a SOS to his producers through his earpiece because he felt he couldn't focus on his professional questions. Johnny's flustered state didn't ruin the show. On the contrary, the audience loved seeing the Iron Man of TV become so small in the presence of such a powerful woman. Raquel Welch brought more than just looks. She brought a masterclass in owning one's personal aura. Her appearances on The Tonight Show were always viewed as a battle of charisma, where Johnny Carson, despite his vast experience, often had to settle for second place. He respected her not just for her appearance, but for her intellect and the absolute control she exerted over her image in front of millions. Johnny's defeat by Raquel is the ultimate proof when beauty is paired with uncompromising confidence, it can eclipse even the most powerful host in America. The fascinating standoff between Johnny and Raquel created some of the most iconic television moments of the 20th century. However, if Raquel Welch's fire caused Johnny a dramatic loss of focus, the next woman would send him into an entirely different state, a kind of dazed admiration and worship for an elegant legend, whom Johnny himself had idolized since his youth, Doris Day. 3. Doris Day, the only beauty who made the king of television bow an apology. I was about to say that Doris Day had never been on this show, and that would have been a terrible mistake. Johnny Carson opened with a rare public apology at the start of their historic 1974 interview. Doris Day's long absence from the hot seat turned her return into more than just a regular interview. It became a national event that shook the oak desk of Studio One. The moment Doris Day stepped out, the audience didn't see the usual mischievous, wisecracking Johnny Carson. Instead, they saw a fan struggling to suppress his personal idolization beneath a sharp suit. Johnny had been a die-hard fan of Doris since he first heard her voice on the radio, and standing before his lifelong idol, the king of television, suddenly became uncharacteristically reserved. Johnny's flustered state was most evident when Doris confessed she felt rusty and was terrified of singing in public. Faced with any other guest, Johnny might have cracked a joke to break the ice, but with Doris, he rushed to reassure her with a sincerity that bordered on awkwardness. "You are a great singer, a truly great one." According to backstage records, the production crew noticed Johnny completely abandoned his role as the sharp interrogator to become a protector. He even gave his word of honor that he wouldn't use any cheap tricks to pressure her into singing if she didn't want to, a concession never before seen from a talk show host who lived for drama. Doris Day brought an air of elegance and a calm energy so profound that Johnny admitted backstage she had transformed the noisy set into a warm family living room. Johnny's submission here wasn't due to weakness, but a respectful yielding to the classic glamour of Hollywood. Camera operators caught Johnny gazing at Doris with eyes sparkling with admiration, proving that even the most powerful man in broadcasting could become small in the presence of an icon of purity. Doris Day softened Johnny with an effortless sincerity. Yet if Doris's elegance made Johnny reverent, the next woman would draw him into a far more complex emotional whirlpool where the line between a professional interview and a seductive game of cat and mouse became thinner than ever. Angie Dickinson, a woman whose every answer felt like a gunshot, aimed directly at his composure. 4. Angie Dickinson, the beauty who made Johnny Carson willingly fall into a bull love trap. The moment Angie Dickinson stepped onto the Tonight Show stage in the 1970s, a distinct atmosphere took over, one where the boundary between a television interview and a public date became dangerously blurred. While other stars came to promote their latest films, Angie seemed to arrive with the sole intent of turning Johnny Carson into a victim of a flirtatious game of cat and mouse. Johnny's legendary cool was frequently replaced by an expression his colleagues called a state of uncontrolled infatuation. The chemistry between them didn't stop at the guest-host relationship. It was a burning spark that melted away any prepared script. Angie Dickinson didn't need daring outfits to gain the upper hand. She used direct, piercing eye contact and open-ended answers that left Johnny blushing on live TV. In one classic moment, as Angie locked eyes with Johnny and addressed the rumors about their relationship, she simply smiled and asked, "Don't you want people to know the truth?" That question left Johnny, usually famous for his lightning-fast wit, speechless for several seconds. He could only laugh nervously and look down to shuffle his note cards to hide his embarrassment. Johnny's submission to Angie wasn't an intellectual defeat, but a total emotional surrender to a woman who understood her power all too well. Technical staff at Studio One recalled that whenever Angie's name appeared on the guest list, Johnny became uncharacteristically energetic, yet deeply vulnerable. She was the only one who dared to publicly tease Johnny about his flirting habits on national television. Her command of the interview space, fueled by the confidence of a powerful woman, pushed Johnny into the position of a man trying to chase a shadow he could never catch. Backstage documents and decades of speculation point to Johnny having an absolute bias for Angie. He gave her the best camera angles, the most engaging questions, and a level of attention far beyond professional courtesy. Angie's mature glamour made Johnny more human. He was no longer a perfect hosting machine, but a man truly enjoying every second of being challenged by a brain as sharp as his own. Angie Dickinson proved that while beauty gets attention, it is intellect and confidence that truly bring the king of television to his knees. She turned Johnny's desk into a stage for sophisticated banter, where Johnny, despite being the host, frequently felt like the one being led. If Angie's intelligence kept Johnny enchanted in dialogue, the next beauty on the list would leave him in a completely different state. A stunned silence before a beauty dubbed nature's perfect masterpiece, Bo Derek. 5. Bo Derek, the goddess of beauty who froze the NBC studio.
That disgusting behavior. Did you hear?
In 1979, after the movie 10 ignited a global frenzy, Bo Derek walked onto The Tonight Show and achieved something no other guest ever had. She completely paralyzed Johnny Carson's linguistic abilities through her pure presence alone. Without the need for sharp wit or scandalous backstage stories, Bo Derek plunged Johnny and millions of viewers into a state that psychologists call collective awe. The structure of Bo Derek's interview serves as a textbook example of neutralizing a host's power. When she emerged, the audience's applause wasn't roaring like Farrah Fawcett's. Instead, it was a breathless silence, as if everyone feared a single sound would shatter the perfection of the moment. Johnny Carson, who always had a joke ready in his pocket for any situation, sat motionless for nearly the first 10 seconds. He later admitted to editors, "I've seen beautiful women, but Bo Derek made me feel like I was looking at a statue of Venus that had just walked out of a museum." Johnny's submission here was purely aesthetic. He didn't try to be funny because he realized that any joke at that moment would seem crude next to Bo's ethereal beauty. Throughout the segment, the camera frequently caught moments where Johnny forgot his next question, not because he wasn't prepared, but because he was too busy staring. Bo Derek's naturalness and at times her naivety regarding her Perfect 10 title was exactly what flustered Johnny the most. She seemed unaware of the immense beauty pressure she was placing on him, and that very innocence disarmed Johnny's sharpest weapons. According to a guest coordinator, Johnny Carson once described Bo Derek as the woman who broke his professional rhythm entirely. He felt like an amateur trying to maintain his cool before a wonder of nature. Bo's presence transformed Studio One into a sacred space where beauty became a supreme power, forcing NBC's most powerful man to lower his voice and become uncharacteristically timid. Johnny allowed the interview to move slowly and softly just to capture every fleeting second of that beauty on screen. Bo Derek used silence and flawless beauty to conquer Johnny Carson, turning him from a host into a reverent observer. However, while Bo Derek left Johnny dazed by her statuesque perfection, the next woman brought an entirely different electric charge, a brilliant performance energy that made Johnny feel like a small spectator sitting in the front row of a legendary concert, Anne Margaret. 6. Anne Margaret, the performance queen who neutralized the host's desk. Anne Margaret's appearances on The Tonight Show always came with an unspoken warning for Johnny Carson: prepare to become a spectator. Unlike guests who came merely to sit and chat, Anne Margaret transformed every appearance into an explosive performance. She brought not only the radiant beauty of a Vegas icon, but a cinematic energy that forced Johnny, the man who always insisted on controlling the show's tempo, to completely let go. Veteran NBC staff still recall the moments Anne Margaret turned the host's desk area into a literal stage. Instead of short answers, she responded with fiery glances, impromptu dance moves, and a level of confidence that was utterly overwhelming. In those moments, Johnny Carson could often be seen leaning back in his chair, wearing a look of pure admiration, only daring to utter simple exclamations of wonder. He admitted to producers that Anne Margaret was one of the few guests who didn't need hosting, as her mere presence created a perfect script of its own. Johnny's submission to Anne Margaret was a calculated and wise choice. He recognized that in the face of such immense talent and magnetism, the best way to shine was to be her most enthusiastic fan. Johnny's professionalism temporarily yielded to talent worship. He allowed her to command the spotlight, entirely content to play the background to her dazzling displays. This humility from Johnny created priceless television moments where seductive beauty blended with innate talent, forcing the most powerful man in American media to willingly become small. Anne Margaret used her vibrancy and stage aura to conquer Studio One completely. Yet that explosion was only half the story of the women who challenged Johnny Carson. The next woman forced him to change his demeanor in an entirely opposite way, with an elegance, intellect, and historical significance that compelled Johnny to cast aside all jokes and treat her with absolute reverence: Diahann Carroll. 7. Diahann Carroll, the beauty who forced the king of television to mind his manners. Diane Carroll entered Johnny Carson's studio not just as a star, but as a symbol of pioneering pride. As the first black woman to break major barriers on national television, Diane brought a soft power that made Johnny Carson, who usually led guests with playful jabs, immediately shift his attitude. Backstage staff noted that whenever Diane appeared, Johnny became uncharacteristically polite, as if he were sitting before a true princess. Diane Carroll's conversational style was a perfect blend of mature beauty and sharp intellect. She never allowed herself to be drawn into trivial or mindless banter. Instead, Diane steered the conversation toward deeper subjects: art, dignity, and career legacy. Her confidence didn't stem from the audience's cheers, but from a powerful internal identity. In these interviews, Johnny Carson frequently had to think 7 times before asking a question. He didn't dare crack a crude joke, nor did he dare interrupt. He simply sat and listened with a reverence that was clear in his eyes. Johnny's submission here was colored by profound respect. He was captivated by a beauty with depth and a persona that was overwhelmingly sophisticated. Diane Carroll proved that while beauty can leave one dazed, it is character and intellect that truly make a powerful man like Johnny Carson watch his step. She transformed the Tonight Show stage into a high-class cultural space where Johnny, despite being the host, had to work his hardest to be worthy of the guest sitting across from him. Diane Carroll's elegance set a new standard for television beauty, leading Johnny Carson to remark that she was a woman who knew how to make everything around her more noble. However, if Diane's intellect made Johnny mind his manners, the next woman brought a different kind of authority, a Hollywood royalty status with the power of legendary violet eyes, forcing Johnny to break his own rules just to welcome her. 8. Elizabeth Taylor, the privilege of violet eyes that broke every rule. The green room at NBC was a place Johnny Carson rarely set foot in before showtime. He always insisted on absolute professional distance to preserve the element of surprise until the cameras rolled. However, in 1992, that 30-year unbreakable rule vanished the moment Elizabeth Taylor's name appeared on the call sheet. Johnny actually left his private dressing room and headed toward the wings just to welcome the woman he considered the last living legend of Hollywood's golden age. Elizabeth Taylor's appearance was more than an interview. It was a royal audience. When she emerged with those legendary violet eyes and shimmering diamonds, the entire production crew and the Studio One audience rose in a thunderous, sustained standing ovation. Johnny Carson, a man who typically mastered every televised situation, looked visibly shaken for the first time. He didn't lead the show with his usual wisecracking wit. Instead, he displayed a reverence that bordered on cautious. Johnny listened intently to her every word, adjusted his posture to be as courtly as possible, and even requested the director to change camera angles specifically to capture the depth of Taylor's gaze. Johnny's submission here was a surrender to history itself. Standing before a woman who had spent her entire life under the blinding glare of fame and Hollywood's most turbulent storms, Johnny realized his jokes were suddenly too small. He accepted the role of a humble narrator, allowing Taylor to fully own the space and time of that evening. Johnny's visible nerves were proof that even a television empire must bow before a true queen. Elizabeth Taylor used her elegance and authority to turn The Tonight Show into a living piece of cinematic history. Yet if Taylor's nobility made Johnny timid, the final woman on this list brought a different kind of power. A primal instinct and a magnetic pull so fierce that Johnny Carson had to admit it was the most complete psychological defeat of his career. 9. Sophia Loren, the total defeat of the Iron Man.
Oh, always.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Well, now, you see how...
A technical report after the 1979 taping captured a priceless detail Johnny Carson requested a few seconds during a break just to breathe deeply and regain his focus. Sophia Loren, the icon of Italian beauty, had just stepped onto the set and immediately created an invisible yet suffocating pressure. For Johnny, interviewing Sophia wasn't just a job. It was a challenge to his masculinity that he seemed to lose from the very first second. Johnny's body language that night betrayed every skill he had for hiding emotion. The camera caught him repeatedly reaching up to adjust his collar, fidgeting with his tie, and leaning forward instinctively as if pulled by a powerful magnetic field. Sophia Loren didn't have to do much. She simply sat there, wearing the mysterious smile of a woman who understands her own power, locking eyes with Johnny with absolute composure. Sophia's danger lay in the fact that she wasn't just beautiful. She possessed a wisdom and a commanding instinct that made Johnny's sharpest questions feel clumsy. Johnny's submission to Sophia Loren was a total psychological surrender. He later admitted to a writer, "You can't interview this woman with a standard script. You can only hope you stay conscious enough not to say something incredibly stupid in front of her." Sophia didn't just answer questions. She used her warm Italian lilt to control the rhythm of the conversation, turning Johnny into a student listening intently to a lesson on allure. Sophia Loren closed the list of beauties who rattled Johnny Carson with an indelible mark. She proved that the most radiant beauty doesn't lie in clothes or makeup, but in a self-assurance so profound it can subdue the most powerful man on national television. Johnny's loss to Sophia wasn't a failure. It was the ultimate tribute to the power of womanhood. Looking back at these 9 icons, we see a very different Johnny Carson. No longer the undefeated king of late night, but a man capable of being moved, rattled, and filled with deep appreciation for beauty. Johnny's submission didn't diminish him. Rather, it served as the ultimate validation for the timeless magnetism of Hollywood's goddesses. Which of Johnny Carson's flustered moments impressed you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to join me in uncovering more fascinating secrets about cinema legends. See you next time.